Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in again today. I'll tell you, we've got some pretty exciting stuff, everything from Delta Force attacks in Venezuela to what's happening to our beloved Drake. He looks like he's facing some serious charges. And we're going to take a look at some of what's been discovered in Egypt just recently in some diggings and archaeology and the Bible. So this situation, you're already seeing lots of supports as far as this. It's really a stunning, whether you agree or not, a stunning raid made by the Delta Force U.S. troops into Venezuela, and they arrested President Maduro and his wife. And Maduro and his wife were right in the strongest military compound in all of Venezuela. So some pretty powerful signals there about the strength of U.S. military capability, and probably some signals to dictators around the world that, the U.S. kind of saying, we know where you are. We see the media really, going kind of berserk on the whole issue, and I'll let other people decide whether this is within so-called international law. International law is really a fabrication anyway, but it's not a first time for the U.S. to do an invasion into Central or South America. It happened a number of times back in the 1920s, and of course, 1962, famously, John F. Kennedy, JFK, took blame for a disastrous attack on Cuba that he initiated in the so-called Bay of Pigs operation, a little more successful one, 1989, with 1984, with the invasion into Grenada under President Reagan, taking out the communist regime there. And of course, 1989, 1990, the invasion into Panama. And guess what happened there? Yes, the president of Panama, Noriega, he was eventually grabbed, flown back to the United States, faced drug charges, and spent 20 years in jail. So for the President Maduro of Venezuela, not looking great for him now. He's going to be facing drug indictment charges, racketeering, and narco-terrorism charges in the state of New York. We're going to see if the mayor of New York is maybe going to get nervous and want to try and bail out somebody there. We don't know. So keep watching that for sure. Interesting that even though international leaders, it's varied around the world, even in South America. Of course, Lula da Silva, who has long been an arch left-leaning socialist, if not communist, saying this is a terrible thing. And then in Argentina, we have President Javier there saying this is fantastic for South America that it happened. In Canada, Canadian government is being kind of careful. They're not outright condemning it. Minister Anand was delegated to bring a statement about it. Prime Minister Carney didn't want to touch it. And she just says, look, we don't support, Maduro. We don't support the narco regime there, but people should stick within international law. So she's kind of tiptoeing around that in terms of Canada's position. Something else interesting on the Canadian scene, and people internationally, music fans are going to recognize this, and that's the arrest and charges against Drake, beloved singer. And these are all allegations, nothing's been proven in court, but the charges are that he used gambling operations, and one mainly called Stake, kind of rhymes with his name conveniently, Drake, used gambling operations to fund some of what would give it a look at increasing his streaming services, so using piles of money along, and again, allegations in cooperation with the influencer, and my kids and grandkids would know about these guys, Aiden Ross. It's being alleged that the two of them worked in conjunction with each other to use gambling assets to inflate reports on just how many people really were streaming in on Drake's music. So that's going to be a nasty hit for sure. Not just the fact that it might have been, if proven in court, that he faked these things, but that genuine, authentic artists really get hurt when people inflate other streaming services, because it minimizes and takes away the possible sales of other authentic artists. We're going to see what happens with that. Drake certainly has sung about one dance, and let's see if this is his last dance. If found guilty, this would be pretty serious stuff for his career. Could I mention, in terms of breakthroughs, I'm going to talk about two women today. Diane Crump was the first woman ever to race in the Kentucky Derby. She just passed away. And so let's say hats off to her, breaking into, boy, if ever there was a boys club for an entire century, it was certainly in the area of jockeying and racing. And first one to break into that club in 1969. And she was a real champion for people suffering debilitating diseases in the last years of her life. And a matter of fact, that she died, it was a very aggressive brain cancer that caught everybody by surprise. So hats off to her and to her family, a real breakthrough woman. They're talking about a breakthrough woman. So we all know who Kim Jong-un is, and the nasty leader of North Korea. It seems like he might be now preparing for his successor. Does that mean he is ill or has a disease? Nobody knows. But he's bringing into line his daughter, Kim Jae-ju-ai, and pardon me, Kim, if I didn't pronounce your name right. But what has happened there, she's been at some recent events, been very highly profiled. One where she showed up was at the mausoleum where, of course, her dictator grandfather and great-grandfather are buried. So in North Korea, they always very carefully plan any photo op. So is she suggesting that her dad, Kim Jong-un, is maybe having some problems? We don't know. Another thing that she did just recently, which caught a lot of attention in North Korea, she was appearing with her father and she leaned over, put her hand on his cheek and gave him a kiss. Was that a goodbye kiss? Nobody knows, but certainly the signals are being sent. I recall stories from my wife who traveled to North Korea, spent an entire week there, helping out with an agency that takes food to starving children. I certainly would not be allowed to go into North Korea. They'd probably arrest me. But the stories that she would tell and still tells about, going into some of these rural areas and the kids in the schools who would put on singing performances for these people working with this humanitarian agency. And anytime the mention of the name of the great leader, Kim Jong-un, was mentioned, the kids would immediately start crying and tears of joy and sympathy for their great leader, who they are told is like God and provides anything that they have. Well, talking about kings, very recently, looking at Egypt, a famous art historian. This isn't necessarily an archaeologist, but somebody who has studied art all of his life, is talking about some of the new discoveries that have been found in what's called the Valley of the Kings, where many of those pyramids have been discovered, and a lot of digging has gone on through the years. But there's not been a lot really discovered in terms of, and a lot really penetrated with new art discoveries there. And they're using AI now. They're using ground penetrating radar. They're using all kinds of amazing new technology. And they believe they have found what are the remains, or at least the graves of, if I pronounce his name right, the famous pharaoh Thutmose II, and his wife. I can remember studying about them in school. His wife Hatshepsut, and sorry, wife, if I didn't pronounce that one right. I guess she's not going to come back and haunt me. But what's amazing there is the timing of this. And there's even speculation now that the daughter of Hatshepsut, that's the wife of Thutmose II, may have been, I'm not saying it definitively, but the speculation, even among secular archaeologists, she may have been the woman who found Moses floating down the river in that basket. So a lot of things going on. We're going to keep an eye on that, see what further discoveries come forth from there. Lots for you to think about as you go into the weekend. Thanks. Give me your comments as usual. Bye for now.